to episode 3 of HouseofX Powers of 10 readathon that we're doing. I'm Fangirl. Joining me, as always, Zach and Peter. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. How is everybody else?
It's a beautiful day in Wellington, New Zealand. I'm ready with some vintage newscaster realness to talk us through the many times represented in this issue.
So as you can see, I have forfeited my formal look because this is a new me. This is a new life for me. The past lives are gone. So this is like a new life that I am coming here today. I am probably Fariha. I'm going to say I'm Fariha 7. I don't know. It just feels right. So that's what I am. So what were we talking about? That's going to all come, all become clear as the episode progress. But we actually have a special guest with us. Tyler, how are you doing today?
I'm good. How are you guys? You guys just answered the question. I'm good. I'm just a little bit tired. It's the end of the week, kind of. So
yeah, and I'm
really excited about this particular issue.
We are so too. So before it was advertised, what was it talked? They said this will change X-Men history.
The biggest moment in X-Men history.
Thank you, Peter, for that, for that enthusiastic announcement. But yeah, so let's get going with that. There's so much to unpack, and I don't think we have enough time. But so let's just hit the ground running. Zach, why don't you give us was it the biggest thing about in X-Men history as an expert?
Well, it's certainly the biggest X-Men retcon in the last 5 years. I'll give it that. If we can take this at face value, it is certainly an issue that is setting itself up to dramatically reinterpret the way that we're supposed to view the actions and the history of everything that we've seen in the X-Men timeline so far. Exactly how it's supposed to change that and exactly how we're supposed to interpret it, I'm not sure that we can say with any sort of definitiveness yet. But it's big. It's certainly a big issue, and it certainly wants to look like a big issue.
All right, so that was Zach's initial. Peter, what's yours?
I think it is huge, and as we know, Zach and I tend to have pretty similar opinions about these things. I think in terms of day one, oh my gosh, there's really not a lot of X-Men issues that stand up to this on a revelation level. I think, whether it sticks, it has to do with how long Hickman stays around, what the plotting is like. Who knows? As we've talked about many times, a lot of the stuff might actually wind up not even being such a big deal by the end of HouseofX. It might just be the setup for everything after. But in terms of watching the X-Men community respond to this, such as it is, I've been in the X-Men community when it used to be just people standing around the counter in a comic book shop back in the 90s. And I can't remember any issue that has had this impact. Partially because they held it back for so long. It wasn't like when all new X-Men came back and it was like, yep, we're bringing him back, and you knew months ahead of time.
Tyler, what's your initial reaction?
I really enjoyed it. And as far as retcon goes, I think this is one of the better ones. So, for me, retcons has to satisfy two things for me, right? Before it becomes a good retcon. One is that it moves the story forward. And I think this one definitely propels it, blows it up. And then the second thing is it makes you go back and look at the action and you're saying, that kind of makes sense. Well, in this case, not 100%, but there will be moments where you look at it and it's like, okay, this is nothing to do with the reincarnated, Moira. But there will be certain instances where you say, oh, okay, it makes sense. She's a biologist and she can fire a machine gun. So that kind of gels together, right, in a bit. So that's my initial thought. What about you?
This is actually the first time I was like, I really wish I've been reading X-Men all this time. Seriously, that I feel like if I was, then the reveal would be as shocking to me. To me, it was like, oh, what do you know? Guess what? she was, so I think like we can say the reveal at this moment. So spoiler, if you haven't read House of X issue 2, you know, but if you have, well, the reveal was Moira McTaggart, who was a human ally for X-Men for all these years, was a mutant all this time, and her mutant power is reincarnation. And this talks about the title of the thing is life, like I think Life of Moira X, like, or many lives.
The uncanny life of Moira X or Moira X, depending on how you want to read that.
Okay, yeah. So I mean, so this kind of follows through the 10 lives. So my first, like, you know, I was like, oh, great. You know, it wasn't, I didn't feel the shock, or I didn't feel that. I'm like, oh, isn't that so cool? And I was also telling you guys, like, this is like a very similar plot premise than 15 Lives of Harry August by Catherine Webb. So I have seen this version like played out before. So it kind of took the shine off it for me. But the more I thought about it, I'm like, whoa, that was pretty cool. But to me, it was just a cool factor, not necessarily that, oh my God, Moira was a mutant all along. So I don't know. I mean, it was like, I think that kind of made it a little bit disappointing. I still enjoyed it a lot, but I don't know. It was like and also because I'm not used to reading issue by issue, I'm used to reading holistically a whole story. I feel like I'm missing that as well. I'm like, oh damn, I really want to know what happens next, so I kind of understand the implication of this. Now I have to wait for like, I don't know how many more weeks left of this to figure out how this all connects. That's kind of where I was. So shall we just jump into the analysis, like, you know, the overall analysis? How do you gentlemen want to proceed?
I would love to talk about the lives. I think we can experience this in the same order that Moira does, because I think there's a little bit to dig into in almost every one.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So the thing is, like, I will refer to you, Peter, given that you have, like, you know, all planned out more better than Hickman right now, to guide us through this. I know at a certain point you have to jump off to take care of a thing and then come back. So let's just keep going, see how it rolls out. So why don't you start us off with life number 1?
Life number 1, Moira Kinross is born. She lives to a ripe old age, marries, has kids, dies. I do think that still sends us a couple of interesting signals, but what did you think about Moira's one kind of bucolic countryside life?
To me, it felt like that's normal. That's baseline, right? That's like the first baseline that she didn't know. That was like the first ever time she was born, right? I'm asking the question.
Yeah. I mean,
well, Tyler, go ahead.
For me, I think the interesting thing is that every version of Moira will have this life, or a similar type of this life.
What do you mean?
Because, well, I mean, Moira 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, right? Is one Moira linking up 10 multiverse, different timelines, divergent, right? So think about it. What if another version of this Moira, when she get reincarnated, did not do what this Moira did? So her second life, the second life of this second version of Moira will be different from this life.
Right. I see what you're saying, that each life is cumulative, so every other life is going by definition to contain this life.
Correct.
And that's the only life for which this is true. It's the only life contained in all 9 other lives.
And all versions of it.
Right.
So this is like, you know, like this Moira actually links up like 10 multiverse. And then you have another version of Moira who maybe get reincarnated only 9 times. And that links up another set of 9 multiverse. So, but the first baseline, I think, is the one that is kind of, let's just call it like, you know, the same for every different version of Moira.
Whoa, I did not think of it that way.
Yeah.
But Zach, what do you think? Like, you know, are you kind of going along the same thought process?
Well, I think there are a lot of different angles to approach this, and I think that's a really good one that we might not want to jump off of yet. I'm curious to see if you or if Peter have anything to say about that observation before we move on to any of the other things that there are to say about this, because that notion of each of Moira's lives potentially increasing exponentially, and therefore there being, if you want to interpret it that way, more than just the 10 lives that she thinks she has, is a really interesting angle that Hickman actually might be thinking about here. Because exponential increases are sort of baked into the title and the premise of this series.
Yeah, for me, that is really interesting because I like the idea of how many other ones are influenced by each one. I think that we tend to just think about, like, I don't know about everybody else, but when I read it, I'm trying to put together like all of them end to end in my head, and I'm just thinking, oh, the comic couldn't fold out that far. But you do have to kind of think of them in a cumulative way and how they intersect and influence each other, and that she was incapable of making decisions in earlier ones that she was capable of making later. But the thing that stuck out for me in this first one is she has no awareness of mutants. Did the Sentinel stuff happen? Did mutants come out publicly? Would she have noticed or told her life story any differently? If we're situated within the mutant metaphor, to me, this feels like an interesting comment on the difference between being an ally and not. The Moira that we always knew, we thought was just an ally and not a mutant, and we saw her life through the lens of somebody who was always attuned to the mutant problem and what was happening to mutants. This Moira is not attuned in the slightest. And I just think we'll possibly never know, but I'm just incredibly fascinated and potentially heartbroken by the idea that all of the suppression may have still been going on while she was just living to a ripe old age.
That certainly seems to be the implication. I mean, there is, of course, the possibility that none of it was happening, or either because she somehow caused it by her actions, or just through what we're later going to hear as the observation effect, that by being aware of herself as a mutant, she somehow changed the course of human mutant events. We don't know that. It could just be, and we're certainly, like, I think the initial instinct of everybody reading it would be to think that she's just living this kind of bucolic existence that is oblivious to any of these big events that are happening in the outside world. One more thing that I did notice from it, which we may want to take account of in looking forward in the series, is that she dies at the age of 74, and we're told on a chart at the end of this issue that it's through congestive heart failure, which certainly sounds like a natural cause, which means that 74 may be the upper limit of Moira's natural lifespan under any circumstances, at least bodily.
So
I think Freya has something to add to that.
The reason I'm saying that, I'm just lighting up because that was also the premise of 15 Lives of Harriet August, that there is a limit. Like, no matter how much they try, they cannot live past a time. And for them, it was 72. Like, at 72 was the limit. Like, they could not, like, so in that world, there was like a lot of people that are reincarnate. Like, that's all of them. And they all have a time limit. Like, and no matter how much they try, they cannot live past that. So,
well, I am so glad that you read that book, because we know that Jonathan Hickman read it. He recommended it in an interview with a comic publication a little while before the series came out. So it clearly is a deliberate influence.
And maybe it's something else that lawyers had to get involved in, given how closely the line.
I mean, it's not direct in a lot of ways. And you know what Zach was saying when we were chatting about this, that this is not a new idea, but the problem is when you combine it together, it reads more and more like that. But while you were talking, I was actually trying to find out thing in the Life One, she did actually met with Xavier in the school.
Very briefly.
Yeah, very briefly. So why are we saying that she was not an ally? Like, what kind of, like, I mean, it wasn't shown, but why wasn't it?
Well,
like
she doesn't spend her life doing anything actively involved in mutant causes, either for or against.
Right, like in the elevator, I'm not saying that she hated mutants or didn't care that they were dying necessarily, but in this version of the elevator pitch of Moira's life, even if she was aware of them and had sympathy for them, it didn't make it into the 2-page version of her life. which I think is fascinating, because all of this rich history that we've been reading since 1963 to this presumably normal human, if we assume that it's unfurling somewhat like we know, even without her involved, is all happening off camera in terms of her life. And I think that's a fascinating implication.
Tyler, you had something to say.
Oh no, I did not. I'm just.
Okay.
So let's roll over to life number 2, shall we? And we'll keep up that. Okay. So life number 2, Moira's in the womb, being like, WTF? I'm a thinking baby, and that's where we start in life number 2, which ends with a plane crash. Freya, what are your thoughts on life number 2?
It was boring. Let's move on. Like, I mean, I think it's just that, like, it's just like, okay, that's when she realized she's a mutant, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So I think that's the most important part of that. Like, for life number 2, for her to realize, and then unexpectedly dying, and then it just did. And I'm so sorry to keep bringing this up. It also happens in 15 Lives, like in that, because when he comes back, I'm sorry, I'm actually spoiling that as well. When he comes back,
this is by the way our first 15 Lives of Harry August spoiler special. So I'm sorry we didn't prepare you all for that.
Yeah,
like
Zach's been spoiling the Bible for weeks now. So.
Like I mean, that's what I'm saying. Like, I've become like Harry August reference guy, girl, and Zach is like a biblical reference guy, because what happens was, like, he thought that he was insane, and he actually committed suicide at the age of 10, but he could not handle it, and that's when his first realization was, I'm different. I'm like, there is something different about me, and that was pretty much Second Life was used for, like, the realization of what it means. So yeah, I didn't think much about that, because I'm like, even though that is the revelation, right? Like Tyler and Zach, what's your thought?
Well, I think there's a little bit more that we can pick out of this, because this is also the life where Moira, in telling her story, or rather, I suppose, commenting on the narrator who's telling her story, informs us about the observation effect. That she couldn't just go through life the same way, even if she wanted to. Because by virtue of knowing that she was observing it and being an active observer, she was de facto changing the course of events. And so this is sort of an important metaphysical fact for the universe that Hickman is constructing for us. It is not possible for somebody aware of the course of history not to change history just by being there.
Tyler?
I think my observation is probably a little bit more on the surface for this one. This is the one where she saw Professor X announce to the world, right, that I am a mutant or whatever, right?
Yes.
It could be because of the way Lara draws Professor X, but I initially thought that, could this actually be Cassandra instead of Professor X?
That is an interesting point. Peter, why don't you comment on that?
So many folks online.
Hang on. First of all, who is Cassandra?
You know this because it is from Morrison's X-Men.
Yeah.
Cassandra Nova, also in the world of fetus fiction, was Xavier's twin who was absorbed and consumed in the womb.
Yeah.
And here's why I'm so excited. I want to go back to Tyler to talk about that likeness.
Go for it. Go for it.
Yeah, because people online have pointed out that in Xavier's press conference here, he uses the verbatim script that he does in coming out as a mutant that he uses in New X-Men. But in New X-Men, Cassandra is inhabiting his body during that period, I do believe. So, and if we get into the timeline math, it seems like it's happening a little bit earlier here.
It is, yeah. It's not quite at the same time. It's close, but it's not quite at the same time.
So there are some interesting things at this thing that Tyler just said was the surface level. What else were you thinking when you had that, could this be Cassandra moment?
I just thought that, just the way that he's drawn, and the way his eyes is looking at the camera just looks evil. And that's what. And then of course the next thing I knew, oh, she had a plane crash, and I'm like, okay, fine. You know, I there's nothing to go on this second life, you know.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, next.
Well, except for, is this the... No, right. Still didn't. Okay. On to
He
life
does
number
look
3.
evil. No, I'm saying he does look evil.
He does look evil?
Yeah, so that's what I'm saying. So before we move on, wanted to ask you, like, is there a actual year that was mentioned ever? Because I forgot that, like, you know, actual year of the world mentioned, or it's just year 1 to la.
Oh,
So,
they don't like to mention actual, like,
Yeah.
real life year landmarks, because that instantly dates the comic and causes all sorts of problems.
Yeah,
Okay,
the line
so
editor, Jordan White, has gone on the record recently saying he'd really like, for the remainder of his tenure, not to have any characters mention their actual age in numbers, and which I think also comes from with the implication of not referencing years that they did something, because then you...
I think Marvel for quite a long time has tried to avoid ever mentioning like real life years that could date a comic.
all right, okay, moving on. Year 3.
Moving on. Okay, life number 3.
Life 3.
This is the first really shocking life. So Moira comes back. She briefly thinks about that she's going to, like, hang out with Professor Xavier, but she kind of finds him to be a little bit of an ass, if I'm remembering the lives in the correct order. And so she goes on to her own brilliance, briefly synthesizes a cure for mutants, and that ends poorly for Moira. Priya, lead us off into this life.
That was like, to me, I was like, oh God, like that was it. I was mostly shocked by it, and I thought that it was pretty cool, like, you know. And the thing is, like, that is, I don't want to say it anymore. Like, do you want to say what I'm thinking?
Yes, that's why we're here on your fangirl channel.
Like, it also happens in the other one.
We're guests on your show, and you're sitting there going, do you want to hear my thoughts? Do you want to hear my thoughts on comics? Is anybody interested in that?
For that
Anybody interested in that? I don't know. It was a long day, guys, so I'm a little disconnected. All my lives are coming at me at once. No, I mean, the thing is, like, because this is also, I think, an important thing in reincarnation history. For one of the reincarnation ends in, like, a very violent way, and this was Moira's. Like, the fact that it was burned, like, she was pretty much burned alive. In 15 lives, he was drowned alive. So that's how you know what's the most violent death that can happen. But in that, one character also says, now you know that you will remember this death for rest of your incarnation. And by the way, he does. The thing is, I was mostly thinking about that, the 11 lives thing, because that's what it kind of comes over here. And what does that mean? Is that Destiny lying, or is she telling the truth, or this is just but it also, I really love it all the time when writers does that, sets a limitation. So Moira's limitation is, if she's killed before our mutism is, like, you know, activates, she's not coming back. I really love that limitation that was set, although I don't know whether that's true or that's another lie. Like, you know, how do we kind of talk about that? So, Zach, like, Tyler, this time, do you want to go first?
I mean, on the topic of limitations, right? That is what Claremont's writing have always, maintained, right? Like, for example, Kitty Pryde, she cannot face forever. She can face for one breath. She has to hold her breath while she's phasing. And when she's in the phase mode, she cannot breathe. So that is her limitation. Right? So every mutant that Claremont writes for long enough time, he sets limitations to it. Right? Like, for example, Dazzler, she just doesn't convert. She converts sound to light. So without sound, so if she's been thrown into space, she will use up all her light energy, and she will not be able to generate anymore because there's no sound. So these are things which I think some writers that come on after Claremont forgot, and it just simply disappears. So which kind of annoys me sometimes. So
you approve of this limitation?
Oh yeah, of course. But yeah. I also think that Destiny is lying.
I don't think that tracks with what we've ever seen of Destiny's character or the way it's presented. I think that in all of the times that we've ever seen Destiny appear, now I'm going to stand by this, Peter. In all of the times that we've ever seen Destiny appear, she never outright lies. Her predictions are always ambiguous. Sometimes she doesn't know how to interpret it. Sometimes the people she's saying it to don't know how to interpret it, but they are never lies. She's like the oracle in a Greek tragedy. She is given the visions of the future as it shall be, but she's not told how it's going to be or what it means.
Peter, you made a reaction face there.
Oh, I have so much to say right now. So I think Tyler nailed it. I think that Hickman is being incredibly deliberate in referencing the things from past writers that he sees as essential to the idea of X-Men. And I think that Claremont's idea of limitation was essential to the X-Men. That's where this whole concept of Omega mutants originated, which was like the mutants who relatively did not have limitations. I think that's why in the first issue, Hickman sets up who is an Omega or not. I was having a conversation on Twitter. What would Moira's power look like if it was an Omega power? We're not going to get into that here, but we could speculate. What would it look like to have limitless reincarnation power, right? But it's not. And I think that that's an important distinction, not only from a character arc standpoint for our characters, but to keep the people who don't have limits much more special. So I think that's a huge, huge element of the scene. To what Zach was saying, I will say this. Destiny never outright lies, but she's not always a reliable narrator because of the ambiguity. However, when she can't see past Life 11, that doesn't mean it's absolute truth. Destiny can be wrong if she doesn't understand why she can't see further. I don't want to leap ahead.
Did we lose Peter right before the...
Oh, no! I'm still
most
talking.
essential part of his sentence?
What, can you see me?
Yes, we can now.
I think we did. Freya, are you still there?
Yeah.
Okay. We lost you for a while there, Peter.
Yeah.
Oh no! What was the last thing you heard me say?
That's a good question. You had started to say that she's not always a reliable narrator, and
the fact that she cannot see past the 11th life, and then
yes,
you stop right there.
Right. So I think I don't want to jump ahead, but I think it's important that we take note of the fact that Moira has decided now that she's in life 10 of possibly 10 or 11, she's going to break the rules. Destiny can only see decisions which are anticipatable decisions in a broad sense. And we could do a whole episode on how Destiny's power works. I'm just glad we're back. So I'm all over that. The final thing two more things I'll bring in here. One, just a really cool art history note for the art history buffs. Pepe Larraz got on Twitter and said that he designed this iteration of Destiny's mask based on Broncusi's muses, which I actually have a picture of that I took hanging across from my couch where I read this issue. And I kind of looked up and was like, ah, because it was just one of those moments where, if you look them up online, it's verbatim the way that he depicts her face is really cool. The other thing is this idea that not only has this issue elevated Moira to be like top tier along with Xavier, Magneto, and Apocalypse, but I think it's kind of elevated Mystique to top tier because Destiny confides everything in Mystique, and I think that this has once and for all set up Mystique as one of the top tier players in Mutantism, which honestly is pretty consistent with how Claremont originally introduced her to X-Men after she had appeared in Ms. Marvel. Yeah. So I am fascinated by Life Number 3.
And there's one more thing.
Yeah, let's go back around real quick for
okay, just one more thing quickly. Pyro calls Destiny mother. That I have never
just call her mother. Like,
I don't think so, right?
Mother.
He does call her mother, and I don't know that we have any firm way to interpret that. I don't know if that's just Hickman's version of a distinctive speech pattern, or if we really are supposed to read something into that. But this issue simply does not give us enough context information to know how to interpret that line.
Yeah.
Oh, so he's not her son normally. I never.
Not that we know of. Not that we know of.
Yep. Only that. I think we can bring this a bit offline later on. But basically, Nightcrawler is supposed to be the child of Destiny and Mystique.
Right. That I knew. But
Okay.
I thought that that Pyro is probably a son by someone else. Like that's what I interpreted it as. But it's not. So before we move to the next live, I need to say how this
Yes,
live
please.
also connects to Harry August's life. So in third life, Harry August also realized his life's limitation. I'm telling you guys what is happening. Limitation, and their limitation over there is if they're killed before they're born. Like that's the limitation. Like if they're which is pretty much the same kind of jabs with the same thing. Like if you are done with whatever gives you the power, their power starts from the birth. So if you're killed, you're not going to be reincarnated anymore. Like your mother is killed, you're no longer going to be reincarnated. Over here, it's like if you're mutant. I thought it was pretty cool. I mean, I'm not going to be. I'll try my best not to mention it for rest of. Let's see how it works out. But yeah, so let's kick us up.
Well, can we stay on this life a little bit longer, actually, because I think this is a big one, and I think that there are things to probe into here some more. The one thing that I think is doubtless going to be important here is Destiny's observation that Moira is essentially a void as a mutant who is undetectable to other mutants, and that she seems to have evolved this ability as some sort of defense mechanism. A defense mechanism against what? A defense mechanism against Destiny and Mystique killing her? A defense mechanism against something else? What are we talking about here?
I think it's detection.
I mean, we've never seen Sentinels react to Moira that I can ever, and Hickman has to write around that somehow.
Well, and also, sorry.
No, go ahead.
You finish first.
Oh, so it's very clever. He just puts one line in and just takes care of that whole, that rules lawyer thing that all of us X-Men fan does.
Right.
He just put it.
It's definitely partly a hand wave, but I feel like there's more going on here, and there's also almost certainly an echo going on of the no place that can be created by the black flowers of Krakoa. The place, the tumor that is undetectable to the collective consciousness of Krakoa itself. And elsewhere in this same life, Moira refers to mutancy as a cancer. So we've got this theme of tumors. We've got this theme of undetectability and voids. There are deliberate parallels being set up here for a purpose that we don't quite know yet.
Yeah, Hickman doesn't do this stuff by coincidence either. Go ahead, Tyler, please.
No, I also think that it is sort of a mechanism to say that, to work with the retcon, like, because Moira has been around. She has been around telepaths all her lives, and none of them detected her previous lives. So that could be her defense mechanism, where no one can read maybe beyond her current life, so that every knowledge that she accumulated is not discernible unless she allows them to.
I was just gonna say, I mean, so go for it. Sorry.
I was just gonna say, Freya, I would love it if you would kind of wrap us up on life number 3. Like, what are you as a new X-Men reader at this point feeling as she's being burned to death? Like, what is your reaction? What are you anticipating?
So I think at that point I was actually starting to think is like is each of her lives is like each of the writer doing X-Men, like it's like a metaphor for that going on, because it seems like every life has like a certain distinct way of it, and it just sometimes she's involved, she's not, la di da di da, and I'm like, oh, is this some kind of metaphor for that? And I don't know. I mean, it was a lot of I think a lot of surface level stuff as well for me. But anyway, but you had a very
that's not surface level at all. That is yes, and a million times yes on that. I am almost certain this is a story. Jonathan Hickman is telling the story of people telling stories of X-Men. And in the same way that Moira seems to be stuck in this circular pattern of living these lives where no matter what she does, it always seems to come back to the same predictable end and end in the same terrible way. And at the end, she is going to break free, and damn it, so is Jonathan Hickman. This is going to be the end of this X-Men circularity, and it's finally going to be breaking all the rules.
I mean, at that point, I was thinking, I'm like, I really wish I didn't read 15 Lives of Harry August. I think it was around that I think it was life 5. That's what I'm like, God damn it.
Well,
like,
this was your second life, Maria. This is your second time
cursed
through.
with foreknowledge. It's
right.
a curse.
like it was really a curse, because I swear to God, I would think this is the best shit ever if I didn't read that. Like, when having read that, so much of the shine is just taken off, because the idea, like, it's like the theme of reincarnations are being also introduced. It's like, okay, life limitation, your power limitation, and then your number of lives limitation as well, because that was also something that has been done, and also the most violent death you're ever going to face in your every reincarnation, so you can prevent that from going forward. And so that's kind of like where I was at. So shall we move to life 4?
Yeah, so I'll just say, as with any life, there's things that we're not going to get to. I think there's a fascinating thing about the feedback loop between Destiny and Moira, which maybe we can come back to later. But we haven't even touched all of the possible things. Or the idea that she now knows the cure, but Destiny will know if she starts thinking about synthesizing the cure and immediately. I mean, there's just so much.
Right.
So, okay, so now we're up to life number 4, which I think we maybe can move through a little bit faster because of what it is, which is life is number 4 is the life that she goes whole hog on the Xavier thing. She actually decided maybe he's not as big of an asshole as he originally cut out. I would say trust your first impression. And marries him. The X-Men pretty much unfurls seemingly like we know it to unfurl. And they basically come smack up like a bug against a windshield against the Days of Future Past Future and get eradicated. So that's life number 4. Why don't we start with Freya, who has not read Days of Future Past, and see what everybody has to say about life number 4.
Is it like the movie? I've seen the movie. It's nothing like the movie.
It's kind of like the movie. Tyler's like, nope.
No, I don't think, like, to be honest though, I thought that was the 616 continuity. That's what I was thinking.
Many people did. Yes.
Yeah, I was like, this is 616 continuity, and that's what we've been reading all this time, which also has like a huge implication of like, is every Marvel, like the entire Marvel universe is relying on Moira. Like, that's like that's too much to handle. I feel that's too much to handle. And then is one of them is Ultimate? Is the first one Ultimate then?
Oh,
Ultimate
wow.
Universe.
She is a mutant in Ultimate, isn't she? Anybody? Bueller? Nobody read Ultimate X-Men?
Remember.
Okay.
She is a mutant in the Ultimate Universe. I don't know how much of that we're supposed to take into account. I feel like Hickman has done his Ultimate Universe thing, disposed of it, and doesn't intend to go back to it. So I feel like that's probably not where he's going with this.
Yeah, I mean, his contribution from Ultimate is the Maker. Like, he loves the Maker and how he like incorporate. But I don't know. I mean, to me, that was like, well, is this Art 616? That's like, it's art, like, that's what I took. So, Zach, you want to go? Oh, sorry, this way. You want to go next?
I'm sorry?
You want to go next?
Oh, I see Tyler raising his hand or pointing to Peter. I don't know. Somebody below me wants to talk. Somebody want to say something?
Tyler, you go next.
I'm pointing to you.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I think one of the things that we may want to bring up here, in as much as it looks like this one ends with Days of Future Past, is that if we take a little mild dive into Claremont continuity, Days of Future Past is the first of the 3 times that these characters, Moira, Mystique, and Destiny, overlap with one another. One of the 3 really important times. This is their first encounter. This is the time when we see them in the same place, and theoretically, the X-Men think at the time that it's Mystique and Destiny whose actions are going to cause the Days of Future Past future. Now, as it's going to turn out over the course of X-Men history, preventing them from doing that one thing, the assassination of Robert Kelly, is not going to stop Days of Future Past. This future of the Sentinels taking over is going to find all sorts of ways to happen, whether or not they are thwarted in that particular attempt.
Which Moira find out in One of a Life.
That's right. This is partly the story of this issue is Moira finding out that lesson in many, many different ways. But I think, given the relationship that we're clearly being told about these 3 characters in this issue, we may want to make note of the various times that they're going to intersect in the 616 universe that we know of. And that's a big one.
To me, I kind of took it as like Moira figuring out limitation of her life. Like, there is certain event, there's no way she can avoid, no matter what she does. And that become her focus. Like this is the focus that every next life, this is what I'm going to stop. And so is this the only life she married Professor X? Right? Okay. All right. Yeah. I mean, that's kind of like the thing. Once again, that other book that I should stop talking about.
Well, and that makes it not 616.
Right. Okay. So that makes it Days of Future Past event? Like, what does it make?
No.
Nothing. Okay.
It's a different route to Days of Future Past. That's the way I think about it.
Okay. In that
case, what did you make of the fact that like it's so similar? I mean, you're somebody who's read a lot of X-Men. Clearly, they're trying to make a point to us about how similar it is. What did that make you feel?
Okay, before I go to that, I want to point out something that you mentioned last week, which is a very astute point, which is Hickman likes to make one small change and see what happens in the future. My takeaway from this is that whether Moira marries Xavier or not doesn't matter at all.
So that is not
one change, that one tweet doesn't change anything.
So that is not the variable.
That's not a significant variable.
Yeah, that's not a significant variable. I know all about variables, guys. I'm an engineer. Like, that's something that I know a lot with, like contributing variable, like, yeah. So shall we move to life 5? Because I feel like this is a bit, like, okay, let's move to life 5.
Did you have something else you wanted to add? Because you said you were going to say that first, Tyler. Did you have anything else about life 4?
Yeah.
Oh, no. I think that was kind of my point.
Okay.
I don't really have anything else.
The only thing I'll throw in on top of all that is I think a lot of people on the internet, because it looks so similar to 616, after they got over that it's not, took this idea of like, well, now Moira knows all the bad things that are going to go on for the X-Men, so why does she stop Dark Phoenix? Why doesn't she stop this? Why? A, we don't know that everything happened exactly the same. B, we don't know that in the comics that we've read that they don't represent her try to fix it. Some things may be inevitable. So I think that's the wrong message to get from this issue, that like, why didn't Moira do all this stuff? I think Hickman will show us, probably in Powers of 10, what stuff Moira did do as a result of some of the past lives to change some of the things that could have happened. So I don't think it's worth getting hung up on. I think that's why people who saw the spoilers early kind of like lost their minds about this, because they wanted to be like, what if? I just don't feel like it's the point of the story at all.
All right. So life 5.
Life 5. Okay. Life 5, Moira's like, we got to be more proactive. We can't play as nice. We got to go a little bit faster. So she like gets to Xavier sooner, and she's like, let's get this thing underway and let's go like full on isolationist, which still ends in death by Sentinels. Freya, what were your thoughts on life number 5?
Going back to what Tyler pointed out, let's change something. Like, she like, that was like, she learned that this is like this thing that I need to stop. This is gonna become my life vision. So the first thing didn't work. So now she's like, let's get ahead of ourselves and see if we can stop it. Didn't work.
Yeah, she goes at age 13, way earlier than she's ever gone before to meet Xavier. Tyler, what did you think about life number 5? Any thoughts?
Nothing too significant, except that is this the first time we saw Far Away?
I don't know.
I don't remember seeing it before.
Any precedent? Zach, you're the one who's been reading all of Marvel for a year.
Unless it's something that I haven't hit yet, I feel like this is the first time that we've been seeing this.
And is this kind of the seed for HouseofX?
Yeah, because you get the sense that it's not Xavier's natural inclination to become isolationist, and Moira is like, no, we've got to try. And like, how does that then change, to your original point, Tyler, top of the show, how does that change all of the futures now that she sees that there are some benefits to being isolationist and some detractions? Nobody had tried it before.
Yeah.
So before we move on, I do want to point out one thing. This is the first time the line changes within a year. Like, it becomes solid line to this. Is there a significance to that? Have that been talked about, speculated? I mean, obviously it's a choice. Like, she goes into coma and then it says genocide at Far Away. So, but the thing is that it's not a solid line. What does that imply? I mean,
Zach,
I don't know.
heard from you on this life yet.
You're talking about the timeline at the end?
Right.
that is it. Well, it seems to indicate in all the timelines where we have that the events are uncertain. We are not told what's happening during that period. So there is a lacuna here. There is a gap in the historical record, and we do not know what is happening between Moira's coma and the genocide.
Because she's in a coma.
Right. It seems to be. Well, we don't know that. We don't know that the other dotted lines are a result of Moira not having functioning consciousness. That may or may not be the case. But it seems to just indicate periods during which we are unaware of the events.
Yeah, because the thing is, like, it kind of comes back in the last 2 lives as well, that this just goes on. So the thing is, like, when she died, because life number 9, especially life number 9, she has to die for life number 10 to happen. But it just seems like just running parallel and continuing off page that we don't know anything about. So that's what I was like, this is like the first time in life that it happened. So I could, like, I don't know what it means, but it could also mean that Moira was not available, or something wrong with the record keeping, because I still don't know who's keeping these records.
That's right. That's right. And if the information, if this is some kind of record that was created by Moira or by her consciousness, then of course it would make sense that we have this gap during the period when she's in a coma. But then we also need to ask the question, why does the record seem to cut off at a certain point during one of the other futures where she's going to ally with Apocalypse? Why is that the point when we stop getting a record for her then? And I'm not sure that we have an answer for that.
Right. So do we want to move to non-existent life number 6?
Yeah. Actually, Sophia, do you want to make this a 2-parter? Should we come back to talk about the last lives, or should we forge ahead?
I think we should, because there is like a lot to unpack between 6 to 10 or /11. So how about we do that? Like, come back to that so that viewers also have some time to digest and come back.
Okay. So
All
we will be back in another video to talk about the future lives of Moira X.
Right. So I mean, it's so exciting. So just let us know in the bottom below, what did you think of first 5 lives of Moira X? What it meant? Like, are you agreeing with all the things we're pointing out? Is there something we missed? Please write all of that. If you want to see Powers of 10 issue 1 and HouseofX issue 1, our in-depth review with Zach's Biblical Corner, trademark pending. Just go to the bottom below. There's links over there, and just hang tight. We'll be right back. Thank you very much for watching. Bye.